Have you ever had a day that started like any other, only to have a single moment completely change the way you see someone you thought you knew? Today's story is exactly that. But before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. What city are you watching us from? Drop it in the comments. And if you enjoy these personal stories, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a thumbs up. It really helps us keep sharing more stories like this. I remember that morning as clearly as if it happened yesterday. The city was just waking up, streets glistening from the night's rain, the smell of coffee from the corner cafe mixing with the faint crispness of December air. I was walking toward the office building, clutching my tote bag a little too tightly, rehearsing the presentation I had been preparing for weeks. My mind was in its usual pre-work chaos, juggling deadlines and to-do lists, when I noticed someone standing at the entrance. It was my brother. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He wasn't usually early, and he didn't usually go out of his way to come to my office. There he was, hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, leaning slightly against the glass doors, looking hesitant. My heart skipped. "Hey," he said, his voice low but warm, a familiar comfort I hadn't realized I needed that morning. "Hi," I replied, trying to keep my voice casual, though a strange flutter settled in my chest. I felt a mix of surprise and curiosity. "What brings you here?" He shrugged, looking down at the wet pavement for a moment, then back at me with a small, almost shy smile. "I thought I'd walk you in. Been a while since we actually talked, just the two of us." I blinked, caught off guard. We hadn't really spent time alone together in months. Years, maybe. Our lives pulled in different directions, responsibilities building invisible walls between us. Yet here he was, bridging that gap in the most unexpected way. We stepped inside together. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers from the receptionist's desk. The light through the large windows hit the floor in patterns that reminded me of afternoons at home when we were kids, sunlight spilling across the living room and making everything feel softer. "I didn't know you cared about office politics," I teased gently, trying to ease the sudden tension. He chuckled, a sound that always made me feel like I could breathe a little easier. "Not really. I just wanted to see you before your big presentation. You always get so focused. I thought maybe I could." He paused, searching for words. "Remind you there's more than just work." His words sank in slowly. I realized I hadn't noticed how much I had been carrying alone, the invisible weight of expectations, the constant push to perform. Having him there, his quiet presence, was grounding in a way I didn't know I needed. We walked toward the elevators, a shared silence settling comfortably between us. It was a silence that didn't demand conversation but felt full, like the space between us was finally being acknowledged and respected. And for the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not just as a sister, but as a person navigating the world with all its pressures and uncertainties. Before he turned to leave, he rested a hand briefly on my shoulder, not in a dramatic gesture, but in a quiet, steadying way. "You've got this," he said. And just like that, a surprising warmth spread through me, a reminder that connections we think are lost can reappear when least expected. As I stepped into the elevator, I realized this wasn't just about a morning greeting. Something had shifted. Something deeper had begun, quietly, in a single unexpected moment. And I knew even then that today would change more than just my presentation. The day moved forward in a blur of meetings and emails, but my brother's presence lingered in my mind like a gentle echo. Every time I glanced out the window, seeing the city bustle below, I imagined him waiting outside, patient and calm, a quiet anchor in my otherwise hectic world. By mid-afternoon, I realized I had barely eaten lunch, my thoughts tangled in more than just work. There was a strange, unspoken thread weaving through the day, the awareness that someone I loved was unexpectedly paying attention to me, noticing details I hadn't shared aloud. I felt a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude, like I had been carrying a secret burden, and suddenly someone was acknowledging it without judgment. When the workday finally began to wind down, I gathered my things slowly, not eager to face the usual rush of commuters. The office felt emptier than usual, the hum of computers and printers softened by the late hour. As I reached the lobby, I found him leaning against the wall again, the city lights reflecting off the glass doors behind him. He looked tired, maybe from his own day, but there was a softness in his expression I hadn't noticed before. "Still here?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my chest felt tight with anticipation. "I figured we could grab a cup of coffee," he said, nodding toward the small cafe across the street. "It's been a while since we just talked." I hesitated for a moment, thinking about deadlines, responsibilities, the usual excuses I would have made in the past. But something in his gaze, steady, patient, encouraging, made me shake my head and smile. I'd like that. The cafe was warm, the kind of place that smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, with soft lighting that made everything feel intimate without being intrusive. We found a corner table, far enough from other patrons to feel private, yet close enough to the bustle of the city to feel alive. We ordered our drinks, and for a while there was only small talk. Work, traffic, the weather. But gradually the conversation shifted. He asked about my projects, yes, but also about me, my thoughts, my worries, the little things I usually brushed aside. And as I spoke, I realized how rare it was to have someone listen so completely, without interruption, without judgment. "You seem different," he said softly after a pause, stirring his coffee. "Like you've been carrying a lot on your own." I swallowed, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I guess I have," I admitted, surprised by how easily the words came out. I didn't realize how much until today." He nodded, his eyes kind but unwavering. "You don't have to carry it all by yourself. I've always admired your strength, but it's okay to let someone in sometimes." The words struck me. Strength was something I had prided myself on, but I had also used it as a shield, a way to keep others at a distance. Hearing him say that, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, made me feel like a weight I hadn't noticed was finally lifting. We spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. Laughter mingling with silence, the kind of easy rhythm that only comes from deep familiarity. For the first time in years, I felt completely present, as if the world outside the cafe had melted away, leaving only this moment, this connection, this unexpected rediscovery of trust. As we stood to leave, he hesitated, then smiled. "We should do this more often," he said. "Not just when something big is happening, but just because." I nodded, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the coffee in my hands. "I'd like that," I said, realizing that the day's surprise was more than just a gesture. It was the start of something new, something quietly transformative. Walking back toward the office to retrieve my car, I felt lighter, not because the workday was over, but because a bridge had been rebuilt, connecting us in a way I hadn't expected. And I knew deep down that this unexpected encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would change us both. The following week felt different. I found myself noticing little things in my daily routine that I had overlooked for years, the way sunlight streamed through the office windows in the morning, the distant hum of traffic, the small kindnesses of coworkers. Yet, no matter how busy I got, my brother's visit lingered in my mind, a quiet reminder that someone cared enough to step into my world without fanfare or expectation. One Friday afternoon, I received a message from him. "Free for a walk after work? I found a park I think you'd like." It was casual, simple, yet it made my heart lift in a way I wasn't used to. I typed a quick yes and smiled, feeling a curious mix of anticipation and comfort. The city had changed subtly since that rainy morning. The crisp air was now tinged with the first hints of winter frost, and the sidewalks sparkled under streetlights. When I met him at the office entrance, he was already there, leaning against the familiar glass doors, a warm scarf around his neck. His presence was reassuring, like a familiar melody you didn't realize you missed. We walked toward the park together, chatting about small, mundane things, books we were reading, neighbors' stories, the city's endless rhythm. But there was an unspoken layer beneath the conversation, a sense of shared understanding that didn't need words. The world around us was moving fast, but for these moments, time seemed to stretch, allowing space for reflection and connection. When we reached the park, the trees were bare, but the soft glow of street lamps created long, gentle shadows that danced across the pathways. He stopped and gestured toward a bench by a small fountain. "Sit with me for a minute," he said. We sat side by side, the cool air brushing against our faces. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a sense that everything pressing on my shoulders had softened, if only slightly. He looked at me, his expression open, steady. "You've been carrying so much," he said quietly, "and I can see it's taken a toll." I nodded, words catching in my throat. I didn't even realize how heavy it was until recently, I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. I've been so focused on keeping everything together, I forgot how much it helps just to share it. He smiled, a simple, understanding smile. "You don't have to share everything with me, but I want you to know I'm here. Not to fix things, not to tell you what to do, just to be here." I felt a warmth spread through me, a quiet gratitude that went beyond words. It was as if, in those few sentences, a part of me that had been closed off for years was beginning to open, slowly, gently, to trust and connection. We stayed there for a long while, speaking in half sentences, comfortable silences filling the spaces in between. The fountain gurgled softly, the city hummed quietly around us, and in that moment, I realized something profound. Emotional closeness isn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's about showing up consistently and being present. As we finally stood to leave, he draped his coat around his shoulders and said, "We should make this a regular thing. Just walks, just talking. No pressure." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief and anticipation. "I'd like that," I said, meaning it more than I had ever meant anything before. Walking back toward the street, I felt a shift inside me. The tension, the isolation I hadn't admitted to myself, had begun to ease. That unexpected meeting at the office entrance wasn't just a fleeting surprise. It was the start of rediscovering the bond I thought time had eroded, a bond built on mutual respect, care, and quiet understanding. And for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely hopeful about the days to come. The following weeks settled into a comforting rhythm. My brother and I began meeting regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for a walk, sometimes just to sit quietly together and watch the world go by. Those moments, small and unremarkable on the surface, gradually became the anchor I hadn't realized I needed. One chilly morning, as I approached the office, I spotted him again at the entrance. He waved, and I noticed a slight grin tugging at his lips, a mix of mischief and warmth that always seemed to put me at ease. I felt a swell of gratitude that someone could make even the busiest, most ordinary day feel significant. We decided to take lunch together that day. The restaurant was cozy, sunlight spilling across wooden tables, casting long patterns on the floor. As we ate, our conversation wandered naturally, from memories of childhood to hopes for the future, always circling back to the quiet truths we rarely spoke aloud. At one point, he paused mid-bite and looked at me earnestly. "I've realized something," he said. "I think we lost touch not because we didn't care, but because life got in the way. And maybe we needed a little reminder that some things are worth holding on to." I smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle softly in my chest. "I think you're right," I replied, "and I'm glad you reminded me." There was a gentle pause, filled with the kind of comfortable silence that comes from shared understanding. Outside, the city moved at its usual frantic pace, but inside that small restaurant, time seemed to slow, allowing space for reflection and presence. Walking back toward the office afterward, I realized how much had shifted within me. The unexpected encounter that morning at the entrance wasn't just a fleeting surprise. It had become a turning point. It reminded me of the value of connection, of presence, of showing care without expecting anything in return. I felt lighter, more grounded, more aware that even in the busiest of lives, moments of sincere attention and understanding could be transformative. Later that evening, as I recounted the day to a friend over the phone, I found myself smiling without realizing it. The simple truth was this: relationships, especially those we take for granted, can be revived in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes all it takes is showing up, quietly and sincerely, to rebuild a bridge that we thought was lost forever. That night, before going to bed, I reflected on the journey we had begun together. The city lights outside my window glimmered softly, and I thought about the small miracles in everyday life, the gestures, the conversations, the moments that remind us of our shared humanity. I realized that my brother's visit wasn't just a surprise. It was a gift, one that taught me about patience, empathy, and the quiet power of being present. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a profound sense of peace. Life would continue with its usual unpredictability, but now I knew that even in the ordinary, even in the routine, there were opportunities for connection, understanding, and growth. And that knowledge, simple, subtle, yet deeply profound, was something I would carry with me for the rest of my days. The city outside continued to hum, indifferent yet comforting. As I closed my eyes, grateful for a bond renewed, for lessons learned, and for the unexpected moments that remind us who we truly are and who we can become.